long-awaited day had finally come. Jack and To Chien were no longer just two people in love. They were about to become husband and wife. For months, the entire village had been whispering about this moment, and now the celebration was finally here. Bright lanterns lit up, the night drums echoed across the hills, and a festive atmosphere wrapped around every home. It was not just a wedding. It was a historic event that everyone wanted to witness. From the outside, the wedding appeared perfect. Smiles, laughter, and sparkling lights filled the scene. But as with every important day in life, no one could predict whether everything would go smoothly or whether unexpected events would test their happiness. Beneath the joy, questions lingered in the hearts of many. Would this be a night of flawless celebration? Or would fate weave in its own surprises? Unknown to most of the guests, there was someone who had prepared far more than decorations and rituals. Mrs. Lee, Jack's mother, had quietly devised a plan of her own. She was a gentle yet resilient woman, the kind who always stood in the shadows, silently protecting her son. And for this wedding, she wanted to give Jack and his bride something no one else could, a blessing that would last a lifetime. For weeks, she had secretly spoken with trusted villagers. She didn't just want to host a beautiful wedding. She wanted to create a memory so powerful that it would stay with Jack and To Chien forever. On the night before the ceremony, she gathered a few elders and craftsmen. Together, they built a magnificent flower gate using rare wood and wild orchids, the same flowers Jack's father had once gifted her on their wedding day. It was more than decoration. It was a living symbol of enduring love, a message passed down from one marriage to another. During the ceremony, when Jack and To Chien stood hand in hand, their eyes shimmering with tears of joy, Mrs. Lee rose from her seat. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice carried warmth. Before the crowd, she presented a small, time-worn wooden box. Inside lay a pair of silver wedding rings. These were not ordinary rings. They were the very rings forged by her and her late husband when they were young. Time had aged them, but their meaning was eternal. As she handed the rings to the couple, her words cut deep into every heart. Happiness is not something to keep locked away. It must be shared, preserved with love and trust. Silence fell across the entire hall. To Chien's eyes filled with tears as she pressed the ring to her heart. Jack gripped his mother's hand tightly, overwhelmed by the love she had carried for him all these years. In that instant, the bond between generations was not just remembered, it was renewed. But just as the atmosphere reached its peak, a stir spread through the crowd. At the gate of the village, a stranger appeared. His sudden presence unsettled the festive mood, as if a cloud had drifted over the bright moon. Whispers rippled among the guests. Who was he? Why had he come at this sacred moment? The music faltered and the crowd shifted uneasily. Yet Mrs. Lee's calm gaze steadied her son and daughter-in-law. Whether the stranger brought blessings or trials, the love within this family had already been tested, and it would endure. As the ceremony continued, Mrs. Lee revealed her second surprise. Just after the couple exchanged vows, the deep sound of gongs and drums shook the air. Out from the side of the hall, a group of young women appeared dressed in traditional Highland costumes. They carried wildflower bouquets in their arms, their vibrant colors glowing in the lantern light. This was no ordinary performance. It was the Highland Blessing Ceremony, a ritual thought to have been lost for generations. Yet Mrs. Lee had secretly revived it for her son's wedding. The sound of drums echoed through the mountains, mingling with voices that sang of love and unity. Elders wiped tears from their eyes, recalling the rituals of their youth. The younger guests looked on in wonder, witnessing cultural beauty that had nearly been forgotten. The entire village became part of something larger than a wedding. It became part of history reborn. Jack could no longer hold back his emotions. He knelt before his mother and whispered, "Thank you, Mother. For the rest of my life, I will honor the love you've given us." Beside him, Tu Qian bowed deeply, her voice breaking with tears. "From this day forward, I will consider you my own mother." Thunderous applause filled the air. Laughter and tears merged into one. The wedding had become more than a celebration. It was an eternal memory sealed in love and tradition. As the drums quieted and cheers filled the air, something unexpected happened. Tu Qian suddenly placed her hand on her belly, her face glowing with both confusion and joy. Jack, alarmed, bent close and whispered, "What's wrong?" Her eyes sparkled as she replied softly, "Jack, our baby, he just moved." Gasps swept through the crowd. Tears rolled down the faces of the older women who smiled knowingly. Some whispered that it was a blessing from heaven, a sign of good fortune for the couple's future. Jack stood frozen for a moment, then wrapped his arms round his bride, lifting her slightly, as if to shield her from the entire world. He didn't care about the watching eyes. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was that he was not just a husband, he was about to become a father. The wedding, already overflowing with emotion, now exploded with joy. Guests clapped, cried, and cheered. For Mrs. Li, seated quietly at the front, her eyes shone red with tears, but her smile radiated peace. "God is merciful," she whispered. "Today we celebrate not only a marriage, but the beginning of a new life." After hours of celebration, music and feasting, night fell over the village. Lanterns still glowed in the courtyard, but inside the honeymoon room, a quiet warmth settled. The room was decorated with soft candlelight and the faint fragrance of flowers. Tu Qian sat at the edge of the bed, one hand resting gently on her belly. Her cheeks glowed with a soft blush, her heart still racing from the day's events. Jack sat beside her, placing his arm gently around her shoulders. He gazed into her eyes, still glistening with joy. "I thought I couldn't be happier," he whispered. "But when you told me about our baby, I felt my heart nearly burst. From today onward, I am not only your husband, but the father of our child." Tu Qian leaned her head against him, her voice trembling yet steady. "Since the day I met you, my life has turned a new page. Today I have a husband who loves me and a family to call my own. Our child will grow up surrounded by this love." Jack embraced her tightly, his arms circling both his wife and the unborn child. "I will protect you both for the rest of my life," he vowed. "You will never cry alone again." In that room, under the watchful glow of the moon, the world seemed to shrink to just 3 souls, Jack, Tu Qian, and the little heartbeat waiting to be born. Love, family, and hope intertwined, painting a picture of a future filled with warmth. Outside, the mountains echoed with faint drums and laughter, as though the entire world was celebrating with them. Inside, however, the silence was sacred. Their wedding night was not about extravagance or noise. It was about love promises and the belief in a future bright with peace. That night, the village remained alive with music until the early hours. But in the hearts of Jack and Tu Qian, the real celebration had already taken place. Theirs was not just a wedding, it was a union blessed by heritage, family, and the miracle of new life. From that day on, the villagers believed that Jack and Tu Qian's journey would open a new chapter filled with love, peace, and warmth. A chapter where no storms could break them, for their foundation was built on more than vows. It was built on sacrifice, tradition, faith, and above all, endless love. And so Jack and Tu Qian's wedding night closed with promises, tears, and joy under the silver light of the moon. But as every new beginning carries its own mysteries, one question lingers: will their journey of love continue to shine as brightly, or will fate test them once more? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter in their journey. More love, more trials, and more unforgettable moments await. This is only the beginning. Stay with us because the story of Jack and Tu Qian has only just begun.